Hey, what's up guys? UrAvgWarGamer is back with another video of World of Warships. And today, I'm going to be taking a look at the Captain Skills build for the destroyers at Tier 10. Well, the reason why I want to showcase you these builds that if some of you might have some sort of confusion that which builds should I pick for which particular destroyer, well, I have to showcase you all of these destroyers and their recommended captain skills, so that you will easily able to understand that why these builds are particularly very good and in fact very powerful for that specific DD, which I will explain one by one. So be sure to check that out, the chapters that I have put in the description below. It is very important to note that these are my personal picks or maybe the perks that I have chosen for maybe a particular destroyer, like Shimakaze for example. So these captain skills might be maybe different from other streamers or YouTubers or whatever the other really good players out there. It could be entirely different from them. But even then, since I do have a lot of experience in my hand, I can certainly be very sure that this will help you a lot in making your destroyer a lot much more powerful and making the ship itself to be very good in winning games. So with that said, let's talk about all the destroyers, starting from the tier 10 Japanese destroyer, the Shimakaze. Now, Shimakaze, well, in terms of this captain skills, I would say I'm gonna go with the RPF sort of torpedo-esque build. Now, why RPF here? Now, the reason why I would put the Shimakaze for this RPF build is simply that if there are destroyers, for example, like Smolensk, that has potentially a radar, obviously it has a radar, or maybe you find Yueyang with a radar, or maybe some destroyers like Z-52 that also have the Hydro or the Z-42 as well. Well, these destroyers can surprise you with their insane utility, right? They have Hydro, maybe they have radar, and what RPF does really well for Shimakaze, since it does have really poor firepower, like the guns are not the best. Like you do have really good alpha, but then it's very difficult, even though you have very good concealment at 5.6, it's still going to be very difficult to just prevent those destroyers from letting you get spotted, right? And that's the reason why what I prefer is that RPF gives me the location of the closest destroyer, or maybe any ship that is, with the Shimakaze perspective. And that helps me a lot to understand and analyze that which move should I do, maybe later part of the game. And also able to mitigate some of their pushing, or I would say radar factor that can counter me, and RPF does help me a lot. That surprising factor that the battleships or maybe any cruiser or destroyer can do, well, Shimakaze can counter that pretty well because you do have torpedoes. I mean, if there are cruisers behind the islands, the RPF will exactly know, or at least show you the location of that cruiser maybe coming from the island towards open water, and then that RPF really gonna help with the torpedo boat that Shimakaze is. So it will prevent the surprising factor from a lot of really powerful gunboat destroyers. Also, the cruisers or battleship that are behind the islands or whatever the ship that is, you can actually somewhat know the location that might be coming in, and you can send these really high damaging, devastating torpedoes, making it worth it to use this. Now, concealment is essential because you are having one of the best torpedo boat concealment destroyer in the game. And you also have relatively decent reload time of torpedoes, so you want to improve it further. I'm not going to say it's like really impressive, but it is average because they are very high damaging torpedoes. So I would say you use this, fill the tubes, that would be helping you a lot. Now, I don't want Superintendent simply because you don't have access to heal. Sure, the extra smoke and engine boost could be very nice, but I don't think so you need more than 3 smokes, at least in the case of Shimakaze, since you are going to be sending Torps. And if you get spotted, you can smoke yourself up, maybe from a carrier or maybe a cruiser that is pushing you, or maybe a destroyer. Otherwise, it's not really that essential because of no heal. I would improve the consumable preparation and reload time of the smokes as well as the engine boost, and that's the reason why I would prefer this sort of build. And last stand is pretty important, obviously, to survive under taking a lot of damage and, not getting your engine making you halted. So that is the reason why I like the Shimakaze with this captain build a lot. Now, maybe just gonna give you some idea of the upgrades. It's a full torpedo build. As you can see, I have 12 kilometer range of Shimakaze. with torpedoes. I'm not using 8 kms, not 20 kms. So that is something that I want to showcase you. And that's basically what Shima is about for me. All right, for the American destroyer gearing, I would say it's also a lot much more towards the torpedo focused destroyer. That is my opinion. I mean, you can always make it for gunboat because the DPM, HE DPM is not too bad, 216k HE DPM. But even then, I mean, I haven't even built the gearing for that. You can see here I have built entirely just like torpedo boat destroyer that you were looking at Shimakaze before, and I think the gearing is kind of have this similar sort of build. Now, honestly, again, the thing is that gearing does have some superior firepower, unlike Shimakaze. Shimakaze has, I would say, really bad DPM, as you can see, 134k DPM versus gearing's 216k, so that is a lot better. So you can take on the destroyers, maybe even gunboat destroyers. Maybe if you might not be able to kill them, if they are extremely strong gunboats, you still be able to just do at least 75% of their HP down while dying. And that's the reason why that surprising factor that they can do is possible. And I don't want to invest that 4-point, I would say, skills on the RPF, on the gearing. Because you can able to take them somewhat better than Shimakaze. And I don't want that thing that cost 4 points. Rather, I would invest more on torpedoes, since torpedoes are way more stealthier than Shimakaze. The reaction time can be improved significantly if I build it for swift fish or to fill the tubes, making the reload time of torpedoes very nice at 88 seconds. And obviously, I love gearing because it could be pretty potent division mate for maybe the cruisers, for example, like the Des Moines, Worcester, Annapolis, the cruisers that can just spam a lot of HE and can spot or maybe radar the DDs, helping the gearing a lot. And I think this is the reason why torpedo focus would be, I would say, better. Now, maybe you can always swap the superintendent to something else. Maybe you can just swap superintendent to main battery and A specialist. I would highly recommend that even, because I could have reset this captain. I don't think so. The superintendent is required. You can always go for the main battery and A specialist, since you do have somewhat, I'm not going to say amazing or not good at all. It has very average sort of anti-defense, but one thing about the gearing is that you do have defensive fire that has 100% continuous AA damage increase. So improving it along with this skill, which improves the continuous AA damage by 10%, does help a bit more with the defensive fire. So I think the superintendent can be easily swapped with main battery A specialist, and then the build seems to be pretty perfect for gearing, not requiring, at least in my opinion, the RPF. And I mean, you can clearly see that I'm using 16 kilometer torpedoes, 16.5 kilometer torpedoes. So yeah, that's basically what my build really looks like. The next one is going to be the Soviet destroyer, the Delny. Now, I kind of don't like Delny compared to the Grozovoi, which I will explain later. But Delny has pretty much straightforward gunboat build, like making it for higher range. If you can use the main battery and A expert, you can increase the range to 15.8 kilometer. Use the fearless brawler to also improve the main battery load time, since I would say you don't want to use the smoke. I mean, you can always swap to smoke generator, but I don't think so that's a good idea. The speed is pretty decent at 45.7 knots, and you can increase it even further with 8% maximum speed with the engine boost. And then you do need heals more than smoke, and because of that personal opinion that I have for the Delny, because it's going to be very good in long range, very comfortable. The shell locks are really good. They are fast. They will hit easily even at 15.8 kilometers. These long range HE shells of the Soviet shell locks are pretty good, and that's the reason why you build it for range and fearless brawler. And obviously you want to increase the healing potential that can be improved by superintendent, and that is all that you need for the Delny. I mean, survivability expert is a must for a destroyer, because any bit of an HP is going to be very crucial in the later part of the game. And obviously you can trade down the DDs a lot with the higher HP, which it does have at 26,000. Also, the very important thing is that you want to reduce the problem of the risk of main turrets, sonar, torpedo tubes, everything that can possibly be incapacitated by maybe CV rockets or something else, or maybe the shells. Yeah, well, you can improve the with the help of the preventive maintenance, and obviously incoming fire alert is really good. Like, if you are shooting at maybe 13, 14 kilometers, a battleship shoots at you, you just simply able to know that someone has shot you, and you can just start to maybe speed juke them, because Delny is going to be very, very nice in doing this. So I think this is going to be pretty straightforward and simple gunboat build for Delny. Okay, so the next ship is going to be the Tier 10, another Soviet destroyer, Grozovoi. Now, Grozovoi build is going to be a bit different, at least in my opinion, compared to the Delny. I will explain that really quickly, that why I would build the Grozovoi like this. Now, first of all, Grozovoi is also having a lot better concealment than Delny, so you can build it. For that, you can increase the concealment to like 6 or 6.1 kilometer, which I would say is very close to that of Daring. The Daring is obviously the British Tier 10 tactical destroyer. You do have smokes, which is unlike Delny, and you do have heal at the same time. That kind of gives a lot much more survivability, at least in my opinion, in many ways. And also against carriers, you're going to be having some better time with the defensive wave fire. So that is something that can change the build for the Grozovoi. Now, this is my preferred captain build for the Grozovoi. Now, the reason why I'm going to be using Superintendent is because you have a lot of consumables. Increasing the smoke, heal, and speed boost along with the defensive fire is going to be pretty much worth it. So it's kind of like a must. Increasing the survivability, pretty much straightforward. Now, there is a difference between the Fearless Brawler as well as the main battery and A Specialist. Now, the reason why I haven't picked this one is because you do have smokes. You have smokes in the Grozovoi, and you can utilize the smokes and can get more value from the main battery and A Specialist, whereas the Fearless Brawler will only gonna work if that if you are spotted and shooting open water without having any cover whatsoever. And I think since you do have the smokes, this gets a lot much more lesser value compared to, I would say, the main battery and A Specialist. And since you do have a defensive wave fire, it kind of increases the value just the same way as what I was talking about the gearing, that US Tier 10 destroyer. So you're also going to get the main battery load time buff as well. So it's not like you are getting too bad of a value, especially that you are also having defensive wave fire, just like I said. So that is gonna help you more with the main battery A Specialist than I would say the Fearless Brawler, since you do have smoke. So that does help a lot. And I would say Grozovoi overall, in my opinion, is a lot much more worth it than Delny itself. So I mean, you can maybe argue with the Delny armor scheme that has some weird battleship level armor, but that's not something that I will explain right now. On the other hand, you do have left with 2 points. Now, either you can use Swift Fish to improve the torpedo tubes, like for example, if you want to increase the speed, which you can, but I won't say that it's like gonna be worth it. The best thing that you can do, that improving the reload time of the consumables, because you do have a lot of consumables. You can see here, you do have smoke and defensive wave fire with the speed boost, and you can also go with the incoming fire alert. Again, if you are trying to open water gunboat against that isolated battleship, you can utilize your heals, and with this really, I would say, relatively okay main battery firing range, pretty typical 12.3 kilometer. So you can particularly do that if you don't have smokes ready at that time and after you have utilized it. So this build will do pretty fine for the Grozovoi overall. Okay, so now we have a German, sort of a heavy destroyer, I would say, compared to Z-52, the Elbing. Now, Elbing kind of don't have the role like destroyers. In fact, in terms of the concealment, it's not looking like a very good destroyer. It feels like a cruiser. And since its guns have insane AP penetration capabilities and insane, I would say, dispersion, the build will also gonna be varying for the Elbing pretty much. The good thing about the Elbing that it has very good HP, and since I have already talked about that, the guns are going to be the bread and butter of this ship, not the torpedoes, because torpedoes are pretty slow, and that's the reason why the captain build is going to be definitely a lot different as well. I have resetted the captain. I will show you that quickly, that what I will build for myself. I would say there are two very viable builds for Elbing. Now, I'm not going to be using the concealment expert for that. I don't really believe that it's going to be really good against destroyers. Even if you build it for concealment, it can go as down like 6.4 kilometer or something. And you can be outspotted by many other gunboats and even torpedo boat pretty easily. And so you just want to make it for extremely guns. If you are not comfortable with, I would say, 13.3 kilometer range, then you can improve it by increasing the main battery and A expert. It's just gonna increase the range, and also making the main battery and A specialist and fearless brawler build will help to improve the DPM by 15% total. Maybe it could be slightly higher if it's like a multiplicative factor or something. I don't know, but it does help a lot. Like you getting a 10% buff, main battery, a 5% buff, and also you do have a defensive fire, just like I talked about the gearing and the Grozovoi. That does help a lot. With its again pretty average anti-defense, it's not gonna help a lot, but anything little is better than nothing. Alternatively, if you do find that the range is a bit too much, 16 kilometer for a destroyer that has, I would say for a cruiser, having really good concealment at 8 kilometer. I mean, from the perspective of cruisers, it's impressive concealment. From the perspective of destroyers, it's terrible. And if from the perspective of cruiser, in a destroyer hull, this main battery firing range is impressive. So if you want to just get the extra AP alpha increase with the already very impressive Elbing alpha, which is like 4.1k, you can increase it even more DPM if you want to just full ham on the main DPM and also the AP DPM buff, like on broadside battles. You can do just pretty heavy damage. So you can also make a build like that. Maybe the remaining of the build can be utilized with, I would say, like for example, you can take the Swift Fish. The speed is already pretty mediocre, like not mediocre, it's actually pretty bad, and increasing the 3 knots certainly gonna help these torpedoes a bit, since their detection is pretty decent at 1.2, but the torpedoes are very slow. As you can see here, that the reaction time of the Elbing is still better than Shimakaze torpedoes. So I think this does help a lot. If you are not using Swift Fish, then you can see here that the reaction time is pretty much similar to those like Shimakaze. So that is totally up to you. You can either build this way or either build that way. This one would also work fine. I would prefer this one. So that is totally up to you guys how you take the captain skills for the Elbing. Alright, so let's take a look at the Z52's captain build. Now it's sort of a smaller brother compared to Elbing, and it also have a bit of a different role. I mean, Elbing is more like gunboat destroyer that just want to farm cruisers on broadside or battleship with HE, insane HE alpha, whatever, AP alpha, whatever you call it. The Z52 is about the smoke and hydro combo. Now, Elbing does not have the, I would say, hydro, but Z52 does with 6 kilometer range, and also its concealment is such that if you improve the concealment with the help of captain skills, you can increase it, or I would say improve it up to 6.1 kilometer. So this becomes pretty powerful to take down the destroyers if they push into you. And hence the reason why the captain skills gonna be more focused like this. I would use the preventive maintenance, last stand, survivability expert, and obviously the superintendent is kind of important because you need a lot more hydro and a lot of smokes if you want to counter those maybe 2 or 3 destroyers in the randoms. So that does help a lot. This superintendent is very useful. You can also farm the battleships or cruisers since you do get some extra smokes. So other than destroyers, you can also utilize these smokes for other purposes. So I would say with this build, and also if you want to increase the torpedo tubes speed, which again totally depends on you. Maybe I don't prefer that. I can probably prefer the AP alpha because AP is pretty powerful. Like the AP DPM, as you can see, it's very impressive at 365k. If you build it like this, improving it even further, and again in some range, you're also going to get slightly bit more depth charge damage. So I think this build would be very viable. In fact, I'm using the Gunther Lutens, that legendary captain, having the build like that, pretty much similarly like that build that I'm using on that legendary captain, and I'm gonna be recommending kind of like a similar build on the Z52. It seems to be pretty viable. Again, same thing. Fearless brawler kind of gets out of the water because you want to increase the range, and and then you have to farm those ships and open water, which I don't think so that Z52 is really capable of. So the concealment and smoke hydro combo is something that can be suited well with this captain build like that. Now we are looking at the captain skills build for the daring, the British Tech 3 Tier 10 destroyer. So Daring has pretty much straightforward build as well, just like in the case of Z52. I mean, you kind of build it for exactly like that. I mean, you can always swap from incoming firing alert or to preventive maintenance, simply because if you fear of the modules getting incapacitated a lot, I think the daring might needs that more, because I have kind of felt that you're getting more incapacitations on daring. So this would be a lot better from incoming fire alert. I could have reset it, but I just don't want to do that right now. I think this build seems to be pretty good. Although it's pretty much straightforward, just like the Z52. You want to utilize the smokes a lot much more. So you want to use the superintendent. And obviously you have heal. Once you have a heal on a destroyer, the superintendent values gets many times higher than anything else. And survivability expert is pretty much straightforward, improving the potential of heal in general if you use this thing. And again, you don't want to be open watering anything here, and you don't want to increase the range, since you do have tons of smoke for yourself. You have 7 short smokes, and I think if you have these smokes, you don't want to increase the main battery firing range or in any way. The shell arcs also are not super impressive. That just gonna work well for the daring. The range is already pretty good at almost 13 kilometer, and with the improvement of the main battery reload time with this build, and you can also improve the AP if you want to. Maybe you can say why I'm using extra heavy ammunition on the daring. Well, there's a very good reason for that. I have tried it, and it's just going to improve the AP DPM of the daring a lot. And remember, the AP of daring is such that it will penetrate destroyers on broadsides, unlike maybe you can say Elbing and Z52. They don't have the AP, the short fuse, I would say. So the short fuse with improved ricochet angles that you get on daring, your AP on broadside will do more damage than you are using HE shells, at least on broadside. Once they are angled, you can always swap to HE. And I think with this AP DPM on broadside battleships and cruisers that are broadside, I think this feels a lot much more devastating with this very impressive reload time of 2.3 seconds. So again, utilizing the smokes and then improving the gunnery power with this just feels overall very good. Now, if you are not a fan of this, you can always switch to even Demolition Expert. I usually am not a fan of utilizing the Demolition Expert skill, but the reason why that I would recommend on daring is you have to check out how many shells that you are throwing onto the wall, I would say. And daring with the impressive almost 2 seconds of reload time with 6 guns mean that you are throwing so many shells, and improving the fire chance to from 8 to 9% will just significantly increases more value for daring in terms of getting more fires. So that's the reason why I can also swap to Demolition Expert, or you can always use the very good old extra heavy ammunition. You don't need to rely on RNG. If you don't want to do that, then you can always switch to that. So that's the reason why I like daring with this captain build pretty much nicely. Alright, so the next destroyer that I'm going to be taking a look at is going to be the French Cassard. Now, Cassard is basically based on the torpedo build overall. Like, this is a torpedo-focused destroyer. So I would particularly build it with torpedoes in mind. I mean, sure, the gunpowder is very impressive already. The base gunpowder is such that you can have 200k HEDPM, but I don't want to make it, you know, full gun bit build, like maybe you can say like Kleber, for example. Like, Kleber is very much like a gunboat destroyer. So Cassard, I would make its role pretty much what it's supposed to do in the game, and that is torpedo focus. So the build is also going to be pretty much similar. Now, in my build, I would say I'm going to be building it like this. I will explain the reason why. So the reason why I would be building Cassard like this. Now, it's not like that I want to just completely miss out the gunpowder that comes from the fearless brawler, because you don't have smokes, okay? If you don't have smokes, I think it's gonna be more valuable compared to what I would say main battery and A specialist. Your anti is pretty bad. I'm not gonna be relying on anti at all. Like, even improving it with this skill is not gonna do anything. You don't have any defensive fire whatsoever. You don't have smokes. You only have the engine boost, the emergency engine boost, which is gonna be making it a lot faster once you utilize it. And since that the reason, or I would say for that reason, I'm gonna be using the fearless brawler. Improving the reload time, if you are getting spotted by a destroyer, you will just get huge value. You're not going to disengage and smoke up and farm anything. You have to just do everything almost open water, or either you have to use the covers from the islands. Otherwise, it's not going to be worth it. Your torpedo reload time can improve with this significantly better at 91 seconds, and also you can see here that the reaction time is 7.4 seconds. So I haven't particularly built it much except from the upgrade side, and here you can see here even then with the captain skills build like this, the reaction time is pretty impressive. It's as good as I would say the Gearing's torpedoes with their reaction time. So you can improve the torpedo reload time and making it a lot much more having DPM against destroyers. So this would be pretty good build for Cassard overall, increasing the HP and everything in general in terms of some gun performance and the torpedo tubes as well. Okay, so the next destroyer is obviously going to be the Kleber, and Kleber is a lot much more like gun-focused destroyer, but even then, its torpedoes with very limited range still has very impressive torpedo tube reload time with 7 seconds, which I would say is very good. Now, there's a reason why I would build Kleber just like this. Hear me out, it's very important. I am building it for concealment. You might be thinking, why? You can always use the main battery and A expert, increasing the main battery firing range. Now, there are two reasons why. First of all, Kleber has already very impressive 13.6 kilometer range. Okay, with that said, I mean you can simply easily able to just gunboat any battleships at around 13 to 12 kilometers, and since you have so impressive speed, like with the engine boost, your speed can go up to more than 50 knots. I think Kleber, with this already impressive base firing range of 13.6, is gonna just make it worth it, and not utilizing the main battery and expert is a better overall choice. Now, if I look at the concealment with the other reason, well, as you can see here, if for some reason you have very low HP in Kleber and you don't want to be utilizing the gun power and you just don't want to, open water farm battleships that are pushing towards you, well, you have 7.8 kilometer concealment with this fully concealment build. And look at the torpedoes. You have torpedoes that are having 77 seconds of reload time. That is already impressive. I haven't built for torpedoes at all. There's not a single perk from captain skill, nor the upgrade that is just improved that impressive 7 seconds of torpedo tube reload time. So with these high damaging torpedoes, you can just spam so many torpedoes, 12 torpedoes within a minute, and you will just do it very quickly. And this really makes Kleber gets huge value by using the concealment from making it a gunboat to torpedo build. I would say torpedo boat build, and then your impressive range is already so good that I don't think so that you need the main battery firing range at all. And that's the reason why I have kind of built the Kleber like that with this in mind. Now if I will explain the Marceau maybe later, then you will find out that it's having different build. But Kleber certainly likes to have improvement in main battery reload time. I mean, you could argue that it's not going to improve the entire defense at all. Its entire defense is as bad as, I would say, maybe Cassard. But again, there are not a whole lot of other good skills to utilize on, except to just improve the gun reload time. And obviously with the Fearless Brawler and the main battery air specialist, you can just improve it very high with its gun power, which is gonna get it down to like maybe 5.3 or 4 seconds with the Fearless Brawler. And also you have improved Adrenaline Rush that can help, that can be utilized by the Jeans Jack Honor. This special captain does help even further with the Kleber. And also, by the way, the turret traverse, Kleber does not have that impressive turret traverse, and you have improved turret traverse with the help of this captain. So I mean, it becomes kinda no-brainer to utilize it, improving the turn time of the turrets. I would say maybe more than 20 seconds to now like 17.2 seconds. So that is very nice. So that's how the Kleber will be very powerful. With this, I think this is a perfect build. I cannot say it for other ships, but I think this Kleber build, maybe you can always swap from incoming fire alert to this one. But other than that, I think this will be perfect build for Kleber. Now we have an Italian destroyer that is Atilio Regolo. Now, Regolo is going to have a bit of a unique build, unlike any other destroyer. I'm not going to say like crazy unique. I mean, you do have a limited amount of skills that you can pick. So I would say for the Atilio Regolo, you want to build it for this way. Like your exhaust smoke generator, which is the strength of the Atilio Regolo, you want to improve the reload time of that. Okay, so I would say the consumable specialist is just like very, very important. Get this skill. Improving the exhaust smoke generator reload time is very essential. Also, increasing the smoke generator consumable action time also increases more, smoke power for this Regolo, and adrenaline inertia is very important, obviously. And now here's the very interesting part that I would like to mention. You want to utilize the main battery and A expert, and also you don't want to use the concealment expert. Instead, you will use the fearless brawler. Now, this is the build that I would pick for the Regolo. Why? Well, the concealment of the Regolo is again 7.2 kilometer. Okay, if you are trying to hunt down the destroyer, you have couple of very good tools to deal with those destroyers. You have sap shells, first of all. You have very, very good DPM. You have 302k sap DPM, and you can improve it with fearless brawler. And since your concealment is, even though 8 kilometers, you do have exhaust smoke generator. If you are pushing into the destroyer that has spotted you at 8 kilometer, and you are trying to push in, you will eventually able to spot it with the help of the emergency engine power, which increases its speed to, like, for example, what, 50 knots or something. So you can somewhat still catch that destroyer with this insane speed. And for example, if that destroyer is not getting spotted, you can always smoke up and utilize the exhaust smoke generator. There's no problem with that. And that's the reason why I would like more DPM over the concealment. It's just that you can always, at any time, disengage with these exhaust smoke generator. They kind of work like get out of jail free card. So if the destroyer is still spotting you like crazy, it does not matter. You just smoke up, you just disengage, and with this emergency engine power, you will just gonna be able to spot that destroyer who made a mistake by getting spotted in the first place. So this build is gonna be very good with the help of the fearless brawler. And your range, your main battery firing range is absolutely garbage. You have 9.6 kilometer base main battery firing range. So you need this thing. Main battery and A expert does help a lot. And I mean, again, just like I said before. Now, in the case where you might be thinking, superintendent, you don't want to pick it, well, there are reasons for that as well. You're going to be not having some addition to heals. You don't have heals in the first place. So you are only going to increase the speed boost and the exhaust smoke generator. Now, exhaust smoke generator might look like really good option, but you already have 6 smokes. 6 exhaust smoke generator is, I would say, very good. I don't think so. They are pretty low in the first place. Maybe if they were 2 and then you are getting extra, that increases the value significantly, because that is a huge improvement. From 2 to 3, it's highly valuable to use superintendent for smokes only. But if it is from 6 to 7, you can already see that the value gets decreased significantly, because you already have so many smokes in the first place. And obviously, you can always disengage against aircraft carriers, so main battery and air specialist kinda does not really matters much. So I would say fearless brawler will help with this build. Now the third traverse of the Regolo is also not that good, so reducing it from 20.7 to 18, I think kinda makes sense for that. So you reduce the gears, and I think this build will do just fine. And you don't need incoming fire alert, because you simply be able to farm them in smoke most of the time, if not all the time. Alright, so the next destroyer is going to be the Yueyang, the Pan-Asian Tier 10 destroyer. Now, again, this torpedo boat destroyer should be built for torpedoes. I don't think so the gunpowder of the Yueyang is that good, like 4 seconds of reload time base compared to the gearings, I would say 3 seconds. You can already see that where the Yueyang gun department feels like. So you want to build it for torpedoes. So you can already see in the upgrades, I'm using the torpedoes in my mind for build. If you are although using smokes, then this build that I'm about to show you is gonna be viable. Because you can always use the surveillance radar, and you can also use something like improved main battery. I mean, with this build, like with this legendary mod, this build might not be that good. So I think you want to use the smoke generator, and this build will work then. Okay. Now, a couple of things that I would like to mention about this. You have Darong. At least I'm using Darong. And the benefit of Darong is that it has improved demolition expert skill, which I would say is very good, as well as improved survivability expert. Again, very, very useful for destroyer. Now, there is something that I would mention already, sort of a disclaimer, that I should not have used the swift fish. I haven't changed the build. I mean, the swift fish should never be used instead of, I would say, last stand. Last stand is a must for destroyer. You cannot leave out on last stand. And since your torpedoes are already very impressive in terms of the speed, and also their reaction time with deep water torpedoes is just absolutely insane with 3.9 seconds, or maybe you can increase it a bit. If you are not utilizing swift fish, it's still going to be pretty good. Demolition expert, obviously, it's like having a 50% improvement in the skill. I mean, if you have 1%, fire chance increase with the help of this skill with 1.5 is kind of like having 50% increase in value for the demolition expert, if you understand what I am talking about here for this skill with the Darong. So I think this can be very handy if you have Yueyang, if you want to set fires. Your fire chance is not going to be going through the roof. It's still going to go like from 5 to 6.5, but still 0.5 does help sometimes a lot. I mean, you can always switch from demolition expert to last stand, or maybe the swift fish to last stands. I mean, if you don't have Darong, then I don't think so demolition expert does help you at all whatsoever. In fact, this is something that I would not recommend you at all. But however, I would definitely recommend you is to utilize this swift fish. These ones are going to be very important. Improving the torpedo tubes, improving the speed if you want to, or maybe if you don't want to increase the speed or the fire chance, you can always use the, maybe I would say something else. Although Fearless Brawler, not going to be worth it for a torpedo boat destroyer, nor the main battery and expert. Your shell arcs are also pretty bad. These are gearing shell arcs, so I don't think so that's going to help you a lot. So I think you are pretty much limited with the torpedo build for the Yueyang in general. Or maybe you can always switch to maybe, or at least get an extra point for preventive maintenance. That would help a lot. Okay, so the next ship is going to be Pan-European destroyer, the Gdansk. Now Gdansk pretty much need the gun build for it, because it solely relies more on gun power than torpedo performance. Unlike Halland is more towards the torpedo boat destroyer thing. The Gdansk going to get a lot of value from the main battery load time if you are maybe looking at the upgrades. But in the captain skills, Jerzy Swirsky is highly recommended. And also, that build for Gdansk is pretty much straightforward. I mean, you do have a radar, right? You do have a radar. It's very short duration, but again, you can spot the destroyers. Even if you don't build it for concealment. Like, you have 8.2 kilometer concealment, you have 9 kilometer radar. So if you get spotted, you just instantly pop the radar. So because of that, I am just taking out the concealment expert. Instead, I am building for the range as well as for the guns, making it very comfortable to farm battleship at ranges if you want to open water gunboat, okay? And Fearless Brawler does help a lot because of that. And if you don't want to just open water, then you can always use the already very impressive gun performance with the 3.3 seconds of main battery load time on 7 of these guns. And also improved adrenaline rush does help a lot. If you are taking a lot of HP loss, it's gonna make your gun power even better, everything even better. So your HP is also pretty good. I mean, you don't have French saturation. It's like having a Mogador sort of hull, but still, it's a pan-European destroyer, so it does not have the perks like that of French destroyers, so don't look at those things. You do have radar, just like I said, you have engine boost, so you can open water gunboat as well as smoke if you want to. And I mean, you want to increase the radar as well as the smokes if you possibly can. The superintendent is more focused, not for maybe I would say smokes or engine boost, but I think for the radar only. Like you need 5 radars. Your radar only gonna last for a very short time. So I think this is very important, at least for me. If I look at the 5 radars, that is gonna give me more value against destroyers in general, if I want to take them down with the poor concealment. So I think this build will just do fine if you want to make Gdansk like this. Okay, so the next ship is obviously going to be the Halland. Now Halland is torpedo boat destroyer, and the build is going to be pretty much straightforward. I mean, you have to build it for torpedoes in mind. But there are two things that I want to mention. I have built it for the speed for the torpedoes. You don't need that. Honestly, the speed is pretty good already, like 90 knots, even without this skill. But I mean, increasing it to 95 knots will be just making them very difficult to dodge these torpedoes. I mean, I like this way with the swift fish and the torpedo tube reload time improvement in mind. But I think the most viable, or I would say the correct build for the Halland that I would recommend you guys is that you utilize the radio location. Now, why radio location is simply because these torpedoes are fast. And if there is a destroyer that is coming towards you, you don't have that impressive DPM. It's still better than Shimakaze, for example. But, well, if you have RPF, you are not going to have that surprising factor. Again, you know that the ship is coming towards you, and whatever is something is there. It's just going to give you the direction. So you can send these torpedoes, which have very fast speed, and there's a good chance with the RPF location, you just send them towards the direction and you might catch the destroyer completely off guard, giving the RPF value so much higher compared to many other destroyers, just like I mentioned. Shimakaze also gets a lot of value from the RPF, and I think the Halland can also get a lot much more value from the RPF simply because of the very fast torpedo speed in nature, and then they are going to take a lot of damage. I mean, if something is in smoke and you have RPF, you know that ship is still in smoke, he did not get out of the smoke, you can just send pretty good torpedoes, all of them in the center of the smoke, and you will find out that you will going to get pretty good damage on those destroyers with torpedoes. And that's the reason why two of the reasons help a lot. The surprising factor, if you caught off guard, is also going to be significantly less because you know the location of a destroyer that is coming towards you. And this is the reason why the Halland deserve to have, I would say, RPF instead of the swift fish. Again, I like the fun factor with the swift fish, but you can always swap it to RPF. Now we are going to take a look at the premium destroyers. So we are going to take a look at Hayate. This is a tier 10 coal destroyer. Now the build for the Hayate is gonna be more towards torpedo boat focused. The gun power could be improved and it is pretty impressive. I have built in such a way that it gets the value from the main battery mod 3, from the upgrades, and it gets the value from torpedoes from the captain build. So it's just gonna improve the gun power and the torpedo boat at the same torpedo power at the same time. So you can already see I increase the speed of the torpedoes, improve the reload time of the torpedoes, as well as just increasing some more reload time. The Hayate reload time is 3.7 seconds, if I'm not wrong, 3.8 seconds. So main battery reload time from the upgrades, and this would help a lot. Your concealment is not really good, but increasing the concealment, or I would say improving the concealment to 6.1 feels pretty okay. If you're able to spot the destroyer, you can gun those destroyers down with the pretty decent gun power that Hayate has. In fact, it's pretty impressive, 250k HE for a destroyer that also have the torpedo reload booster, and you also have like 10 Shimakaze torpedoes. Yeah, that is pretty nice. And you also have speed boost and the smokes, although not the speed like Shimakaze, but still, it can have a very good role as a torpedo-focused destroyer as well as the gun-focused destroyer, both at the same time. If you might be thinking that why I haven't used the superintendent, that can help a lot. In fact, it can be very valuable, and you might, if you like to have the extra torpedo reload booster, consumable, sure, you can use superintendent, but at least what I have felt when I was playing the Hayate, the reload time of the torpedo reload booster is significantly higher. It's like almost 4 minutes. So I think you mostly able to utilize the torpedo reload booster, like 3 of them, at least what I have felt when I play Hayate. So that's the reason why you might not need superintendent. Increasing of smoke is good, but you don't have heals at all in the first place, again reducing the value. And what I would say would be a lot much more preferred to increase the gun power. The survivability is going to be significantly higher if you have a good chance in killing the destroyer before he kills you. At least that's what I always think when I make it sort of gun focused, onto the torpedo focused destroyer, whatever you call it. It's a hybrid, but still making it this way feels very nice to me. Again, my personal thoughts and opinions on the Hayate with the build. Maybe you can just make it a bit different with the torpedo rotor booster in mind using Superintendent, but I felt it to be very comfortable. Alright, so another coal ship which we have is going to be the American Tier 10 destroyer Forrest Sherman. Now, Forrest Sherman, pretty much straightforward build. I mean, it's a gunboat destroyer. It has SAP. It has impressive SAP DPM. 387 SAP DPM is just absolutely mind-boggling. You still also have very good, I would say, impressive HE DPM. So building it for guns is kind of a no-brainer. Now, I would recommend you to utilize Halsey. And even though this build might look like a bit limited because you are losing out the flexibility in farming the ships at ranges, because the shell velocity of the Sherman with these SAP shells is with the SAP or HE shells or the shells in general having very decent shell velocity. So maybe you can swap to main battery and A expert. You can increase the main battery firing range if you want to. But again, what I felt really is that you have smokes. And in the case of Sherman, you can have from 2 smokes to 3 smokes. Now again, the less smokes you have, I have talked about that previously when I was talking about some other destroyer, and I was emphasizing this very important thing. If you have less smokes or less consumables in general, and then you are using the Superintendent, it will be increasing the value of that particular destroyer utility significantly. And in this case, I think Forrest Sherman can get so much value from the Superintendent. Your firing range is pretty okay. It's not like crazy good, nor it's like too bad at all. It's like in the middle. It's in the middle of the pack. And I want to improve the gun power, increasing the main battery load time, and continuous AA damage. I would say started to get more value with the Sherman. I mean, you have defensive AA fire that has continuous 100% AA damage. So that is something that will sync pretty well with the main battery load time and the continuous AA damage. So defensive AA fire, again, if you have destroyers that have defensive AA fire, it started to give more value from fearless brawler to this skill. And if you do have smokes, a lot of smokes, for example, then again the fearless brawler value gets a lot much more diminished, and then your Superintendent value will be increased significantly, and you should not use this fearless brawler in the first place if you have smokes. So yeah, I have built it kind of in a very weird way. I mean, you can always switch from Swiftfish to definitely Demolition Expert. In fact, I would recommend to utilize the Demolition Expert if you can. This would help a lot. You do have so many shells that you throw in a short amount of time, and the fire chance is already 9%. Increasing it to 10% means it's definitely gonna make it more powerful. And also, this captain build is also something that I want to mention, that it is a very generalistic sort of captain build. I mean, this is a Halsey. I want to utilize the Halsey on maybe the Kid, maybe some other destroyers than the Sherman itself, and I think it's still going to be pretty viable for Kid. If you look at the other perspective, other point of view, for example, in the Kid's point of view, this build will work just fine. I do not want to just redistribute the points again and again and again for maybe the Sherman, for maybe the Kid, for maybe the Monaghan, all the other premium destroyers, just to utilize the Halsey. So I think this will just gonna work for everything pretty well. Although you can always argue that you can pick the main battery and A expert as well as the Demolition Expert for the Sherman. That is totally up to you. You can also use Fearless Brawler if you want to become a madman, having an absurd SAP DPM of more than 400k, which is gonna be pretty absolutely bonkers if the destroyer wants to take on Sherman.